All right, ladies and gentlemen, today we are finally going to do the fifth and final way to solve a quadratic equation. We're going to do that by using the quadratic formula. Let's get started. The quadratic formula is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So some problems cannot be solved by factoring or by using square roots, but in some of the completing the square can get kind of ugly. So we can use the quadratic formula to find the quadratic roots. The quadratic formula is different than the quadratic equation, and I'm going to show you that in just a minute. So let's try the song again. The quadratic formula is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. All right, so looking at this, on the left we have the quadratic formula, and on the right we have a quadratic equation. The difference between the two is the quadratic formula is used to find the roots of any quadratic equation. All right, so now let's look at this quadratic equation. X squared minus 6x plus 4 equals 0. The first step, and I would write this down if I were you, is to set the equation equal to 0. Not all quadratic equations are set equal to 0. So we have to make sure that we set it equal to 0, and this one happens to be equal to 0. Next, we're going to identify a, b, and c. A is the number in front of x squared, b is the number in front of the x, and c is the constant. So a equal 1, b equal negative 6, and c equal 4. Then we're going to do something called what I call plug and chug. I'm going to replace the variables a, b, and c with the numbers into the quadratic formula. And then I'm going to chug out an answer using my calculator. All right, so I'm going to put in negative b. Notice I put it around in parentheses with the negative sign in front of it because it's the opposite of b, or negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared, which is negative 6 squared, minus 4, and it's always minus 4. 4 we use every single time, times a, which was 1, and in this case our c also is 4. All over 2 times 1. You should recognize underneath of that square root symbol is our discriminant. So let's get going here. And now let's simplify this. So the opposite of negative 6 is positive 6. Okay? Plus or minus negative 6 times itself is positive 36, times 4 times 1, which is 4, times 4 is 16, so 36 minus 16, that whole thing is over 2. Now we're going to simplify what's under the radicand, okay? So, which is 20. 6 plus or minus the square root of 20 divided by 2. All right, so now I'm going to give you the calculator input. So notice we have 6 plus or minus the square root of 20 divided by 2. We have two separate equations here. You might want to write yourself a note, two separate equations. Definitely write each one out like I'm going to show you here. The first equation is 6 plus the square root of 20 divided by 2. And the second equation is 6 minus the square root of 20 divided by 2. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the calculator input, how we put in the key, all the keystrokes. All right, so I want you to write these keystrokes down, because now this is using the Texas Instrument TI-30XA, because that is the calculator that is approved by our county and is approved by the state of Florida for you to use on your end of course exam on the calculator day. So here we go. First thing we're going to do is 6, and we're going to do plus 20 times this, or just square root, equal divided sign 2. So 6 plus 20 square root equal divided by 2. And then you're going to hit equal. Okay? So write that down, please. And the other one is the same. 6 minus 20 square root equal divided 2. Take a moment to write those symbols down. I put mine in little square boxes so that I know that it's a keystroke for my calculator. All right, so what happens when I put these into the calculator? So take a moment, pause my video right here, take a moment, and find the answers, at least for the first one. When you're ready, go ahead and restart the video and see if you get the same thing on your calculator that I get on mine. All right, did you get 5.23606 and so on? All right, now take a minute and do the second one. 6 minus 20 square root equal divided 2 equal. And did you get this answer? 0.7639320 and so on. All right, so now what we're going to do, it really depends on the directions. Sometimes the directions ask you to leave it in simplest radical form or simplified radical form. Sometimes the directions don't give you any directions other than to find the roots. And in this case, you can find the roots and round to the nearest hundredth. If the directions do not say, round to the nearest hundredth. Sometimes the directions will tell you to round to the nearest tenth if necessary. So you just have to follow the directions. So we're going to round to the nearest hundredth on each one of these. And just like the other 4 ways, when we write the answer down, we put x equal, and we put set brackets, and I like to put it in numerical order, but it doesn't really matter. 0.76 or 76 hundredths, and 5 and 23 hundredths or 5.23. It's time for the song again. Can you sing with me? The quadratic formula's negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. All right. I have a second quadratic equation. Write this one down. It's x plus 6x plus 10 equals 0. And actually, if you are looking on your worksheet, it is number 5. Okay. So on number 5, what we're going to do, same exact thing, set it equal to 0. It already is, so I just have to write it down. And then I'm going to identify A, B, and C. A is 1, B is 6, and C is 10. Now I'm going to plug and chug. The opposite of 6 plus or minus the square root of 6 squared minus 4 times 1 times 10 divided by 2 times 1. All right. So now, let's go ahead and simplify that. Well, the opposite of 6 is negative 6. Plus or minus 6 times 6 is 36. Minus 4 times 10, which is 40. All divided by 2 times 1, which is 2. Let's keep going with simplifying. And x plus or minus the square root of 4 divided by 2. Ladies and gentlemen, what two numbers multiply together to give me negative 4? Or what one number multiplies by itself to give me negative 4? Well, there isn't any number that multiplies by itself to give me a negative 4. 2 times 2 gives me positive 4. Negative 2 times negative 2 gives me positive 4. The only way I can get negative 4 is that if I have a positive 2 and a negative 2. And even though they're very similar, they are not the same. So the answer for this and any equation that we use the quadratic formula with that has a negative underneath the square root symbol is going to be no solution. All right, here we go again. The quadratic formula is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. All right, the next problem is not on your handout. You will need a sticky note or a piece of paper to write it on. When you have your sticky note or your paper, come back. So this is the problem. X squared plus 4x plus 17 equals 8 minus 2x. So the first thing we have to do is set it equal to 0. And this one is not equal to 0. So I'm going to subtract 8 from both sides and add 2x to both sides, giving me with x squared plus 6x plus 9 equals 0. Now is the only time that I can go ahead and identify my a, b, and c. A is 1, b is 6, and c is 9. Okay, we're going to plug and chug. So the opposite of 6 plus or minus the square root of 6 squared, which is or minus 4 times 1 times 9, all divided by 2 times 1. Now, I know you noticed that b in all three of my examples has either been 6 or negative 6, and a has always been 1. But a and b will change. It just happens that I use 3 problems that have similar a and b. Okay? But anyway, so now we are going to do negative 6, or the opposite of 6, plus or minus the square root. And remember, we have b squared, so that was 6 times 6, so it's 36 minus 36, all divided by 2. And we get the, negative 6 plus or minus the square root is 0, all divided by 2. All right, so let's think this through a second. All right, what's the square root of 0? Isn't that going to be 0? So it doesn't matter if I have here a negative plus the square root of 0 or a negative 6 minus the square root of 0. It absolutely makes no difference whatsoever. I only have one root. That means that my parabola, if I were drawing the parabola, is going to have its vertex on the x-axis. And that is going to be at negative 3. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's all for now. And no, we're not going to sing the quadratic formula again, but we might tomorrow. Until later.